So, all right. So, thanks for joining for part two. So, kind of where do we go from here? So, we've unpacked and unloaded, and whew. So, obviously, it inspired you to go back and get your PhD, and it's actually something that I'm considering, but in a different field. Public health and IT is what my background is in. Um, are you fully retired? Do you ever see yourself, going back in and flying again or even training or anything?
Yeah, that fully retired thing. I am not I'm fully retired from the airline, but I'm actually working as an aviation safety consultant for aero consulting experts and also on my own. So that is keeping me very busy doing that. And I'm working on the next novel in the series, which I'm going to tell everyone if you like to read this whole Flight Force series, Flight for Control, all the way up through Flight for Justice. The new one's going to be Flight for Revenge. Those books were actually based on real accidents. And then when the second one, when we merged with Delta, everything is based on the events in my case. And we get to Discovery and to the Justice books, verbatim trial testimonies in there. So they're really fascinating and they're fun. And I had to add murder, sex, and a sinister plot in because nobody would believe this stuff is true, right? And so I'm working on the revenge book, and then they also want to make a movie of this. I had three different producers trying to put this together, and a few years back, and actually 2 years back, trying to figure out how to do this. But it was so complicated because we had the union, the dirty doctors, the FAA, management. It's like it almost would be a better Netflix series because there's so many different angles. And finally, one of the producers said, Karlene, write the book, we will make the movie. And yeah, so I'm doing that. I actually have it done, but it's 500 pages.
Mhm.
And so it's sitting on a shelf right now while I'm writing the revenge book. When there's no justice, there is revenge. It's most fun. But then I'll pick it back up. So I'm working on two projects right now at the same time, in addition to the testimony. And then my sister's dragging me, trying to turn me into a golfer. So I'll go golfing with her. But
My grandfather, he was actually a bomber pilot in World War II, part of our greatest generation, and he loved golf as well. I tried, I took a couple of lessons, but that ball is hard to hit. So
I
it's-
know it's just sitting there. You think it would be the easiest thing in the world.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to something else, it's so interesting of the angle that they took to try to take you down. The other thing, I've had my own, struggles here and there with mental health, but I'm obviously a bigger guy, using a CPAP. And I'm not trying to say that this is something or another angle there, but, just to try to, pay a doctor to just simply sign a form with a diagnosis on it. So, an opinion of yours, someone that I want to say, I'll let you kind of say it yourself, the diagnosis that they tried there. Is there any recovery from someone with that diagnosis to even stepping back into a cockpit?
No, and that's why they selected that one because once you're bipolar, you've got to be on medication and uh, so yeah. But the problem with the medical industry is when these doctors diagnose you, then it's as if it were true. It just sticks. And it was a great consternation to Delta that I never lost my medical, even after their doctor giving me this. So people go, how could you be diagnosed with this and then get your medical? Um, but I was told by my union and representatives and AMAS it used to be ALPA Aeromedical, but it's I forget what AMAS stands for. But they support the pilots. They're our medical team for ALPA. Okay. And so those doctors, the doctor there, Dr. Riccatella said, don't get your medical. My union cap, don't get your medical. And I'm thinking, huh, that doesn't make sense because if I were to get my medical, well, this Dr. Altman's out doing his thing and Delta pulls me and I go get my medical, wouldn't that support? that I didn't have a problem of any kind, because why would they give anyone who has a mental problem a medical? They wouldn't, right? So I go get my medical. And and this is really good for all the pilots out there. You know what? Here's the thing. Um, I don't know if the FAA ever read my report, my it was an 8,500 document submitting and saying um, why I went to these doctors, because you have to disclose it. And I disclosed all the doctors. I was going to Altman's, every Altman visit. They had me go to some doctor in Seattle to go take the neuropsychological testing. And what I wrote for the reason was corporate political action. Okay. So, and my AME knew what was going on. So we put corporate political actions, the reason I'm seeing these doctors, and they issue me my medical. So one of two things happened. Either the FAA never reads these things that's what I really think's going
It's
on.
checking
I
a
don't
box,
think,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think they ever read any of it. If your AME is willing to submit your medical and not defer it, then they don't look at it. Because why would they? They don't have, now what they're doing is they're going and double checking what the AME did. Huh. They have too many thousands of pilots. They're not going to do that. And so they only look and review the ones that go, we're going to defer this medical for whatever reason your AME says. So get a good AME who doesn't chicken out and defer it. Because I got my medical, and then I got diagnosed on Christmas Eve. He sent me a he wanted to make sure I knew on Christmas Eve. So I got two things. I got a FedEx envelope and an email. and and so I didn't even look at the report. I just kind of stuffed it by on the shelf. I shelved it literally for later because I was going to let it ruin my holidays. Um,
Yeah.
but then I went to the Mayo Clinic. So now my next medical's due like around, is it due in January? No, yeah, in January. And so I went to the Mayo Clinic and they go, okay, you're not bipolar. Thank you. So they write a letter and a report to my AME, and I go out to I go through the whole physical process, and then and pay him even. And then he says, Karlene, I'm really sorry. I can't give you your medical. And why? And he says, well, we're going to defer it. But why? Well, let me show you. And I have a copy of the email. There's a friend of his, Warren Silberman, who worked for the FAA. So now my AME is getting nervous because this is a big political thing. It's in the news now. And these AMEs, this is good money for these AMEs. And he's defended me and supported me and even wrote a letter to the doctor on my behalf, Dr. Altman, who never, threw it away, never found its way into the medical report. This very beautiful letter of from Miami. And so, but now Warren Silberman from the FAA emails my AME and says, don't get backed in a corner. Don't support this airman any more than you have. Don't you get backed in a corner. It's not your fault. Delta is the baddies. He referred to Delta as the baddies. And so
Like,
now,
so BADDIES?
uh-huh, that's what he
Wow.
wrote, the baddies. And so then he's like, I'm going to defer it. I'm going, Dr. Larry, you defer my medical. Once they take it away, I will never get it back. And we were going the very next day into an aviation conference out in Puyallup that I do. And this doctor's really a good-hearted man. And he comes out, and it looked like it looked like he had been crying or had no sleep. Dark circles under his eyes were red. He's like, Karlene, I'm really sorry. I think I have an idea. I'm going to reach out to Dr. Wyrick, the regional flight surgeon. And he goes, I held your paperwork. I didn't defer it, but let's reach out to him and see what he says. So he gives the Mayo Clinic's little mini report that says, here's these 10 doctors, and we all say she's not bipolar. He gives him says, I did the
Oh, I
evaluation.
want to pause
She's
you.
fine.
You had to go
Yeah.
to 10 different doctors.
Yeah, I was there for 3 days. And so I met with one psychiatrist, and I went with a bipolar specialist, and then I forget what the other guy, so all different titles. So it's really interesting. And here's the validity of this. I didn't physically see all 10. I think I saw 4 different doctors. Then what they do is they have a meeting. They gather all their information, and then they come to a table, and they have other doctors at the table because they don't want to do. There's something called transference. That say you and I meet, and has nothing to do with your medical, but I just don't like you because you wear blue and I don't like blue. Just something about the person. Sometimes we just don't like the people we meet for we don't know why, but there's just something there. Contrary, this person may come in and just charm you. Okay. And you're so enamored with this charming person that you fall in love with them and they're just a swindler, right? So you're some when we meet people, sometimes our perceptions, our behavior, there's other things versus just the facts might get involved in those evaluations. And the Mayo Clinic doesn't want that for either direction. So now the people who evaluated will go on this table, but they bring a whole list of doctors who have never met you. They're just looking at the data. They're looking at the reports, what was said, the tests. And so it really comes to a really authentic, thumbs up or thumbs down evaluation. Okay, so it makes it better. So Dr. Wyrick reads this stuff and he goes, "Yeah, I'll give her a medical. I have no problem." Now, in the pilot contract, which is absolutely wrong, and the union has pulled the wool over pilots' eyes, but in the pilot contracts, they say if you get pulled for mental health, the company is not allowed to tell the FAA until the final, because you have to go to 3 doctors, their doctor, your doctor, and a neutral. Until the final results, we won't tell the FAA. This is to protect you. And number one, it doesn't protect the pilot because the pilot's not flying anyway, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so it doesn't matter if the FAA knows. And what it's actually doing, and what Judge Morris in trial said, because he was livid, he, like myself, believes if there's a mental health concern at the onset, you tell the FAA, you get that pilot, the Delta or the company pulls a pilot from duty, the FAA suspends the license until the resolution. Okay. But they don't want the FAA involved because once the FAA gets involved and they go, wait a minute, that airman doesn't have a problem, they lose their power to pull you. Okay. So they want to keep the FAA in silence. So little Karlene Petitt keeps getting her first class medical. So when I get it the second time after my bipolar diagnosis, I have to shove it in Delta's face. So Dr. Faulkner over at Delta, I write to him, "Hey, Dr. Faulkner, you were absolutely correct. This was twofold." Because he had told me this was a misunderstanding when he was trying to hook the line and reel me in. "Don't worry, Karlene, this is a misunderstanding. Everything is going to be fine." Well, then the next day he goes, "Oh, no, I can't do anything about it. Once you're in, you got to go through the process." So when we met, he did believe there's something weird here. You don't have the problem they say. But then they spoke to him, and the next day I did. So anyway, Dr. Faulkner, and I wanted it to get in writing that he acknowledged, he said it was a misunderstanding, and because it was verbal. So, hey, Dr. Faulkner, you were absolutely correct. This is a misunderstanding. Look, I got my medical again. Now, holy cow, I'm not going to even swear on that, but did it hit the wind down at Delta Country? How the heck did she get her medical after our doctor said she's bipolar? This is impossible. So Delta reports to the FAA, even though
And
it's
a
in violation of
knee-jerk
the
reaction,
contract.
a knee-jerk
Yeah,
reaction. Yeah.
but it's in violation of the contract. So now this gets even better. Not only do they report to FAA, but it's Dr. Michael Berry is a deputy federal flight surgeon. They call Michael Berry. Okay. Michael Berry has a history with Delta. Michael Berry was Delta's doctor back in the day, and they did the same thing to a Captain Wayne Whittier. They called him Captain Wow. And it's Captain Wayne O. Whittier. So Captain Wow reported pension fraud, and they're going to pull him and school him. You don't do this. They're going to make him crazy. And so this Dr. Michael Berry is involved in this, and it goes to court. And the judge orders Delta. He makes a ruling. Delta, you can never use that doctor again. That doctor goes to the FAA and he works his way up to the top position. Okay. So Delta now has somebody to call, deputy federal flight surgeon. Why in the heck this is going on? And then the deputy federal flight surgeon calls Wyrick and said, "What'd you do?" And I know this because I went and met Wyrick during trial, our courthouse was in his building, and I'd never met him. He just gave me my medical based on the data. So I go down, and he's warmly shaking my hand and thanking me for standing up for this, and and he says, and his secretary is like, "Oh, Karlene, thank you for pursuing this." But he told me, he goes, "My boss called me and said, why the heck did you give her a medical?" And he says, because it was the right thing to do. Now,
Mm.
Wyrick was a general, okay, so he's got a background. And so they said, well, okay, you got to go investigate and you got to do it again. And I'm thinking this is kind of funny. Now, would you tell a doctor who
Or
ruled one
sad. I don't
way
know
to
that
go?
funny is the right word. Is it sad? But
It is, but in hindsight, here's the point. You either laugh or you cry, right?
yeah.
Okay. So I opt to laugh. Um, so then Wyrick, I mean, because you can't make this stuff up. And
Mhm.
so this is the fun part of working all these little intricacies into the novels because they're fascinating. So Wyrick tells them, and then now if you told the doctor, hey, you gave a wrong diagnosis, go do it again, do you think they're going to give you a different one? Probably not. And they're going to go, oh, yeah, I was incorrect. Let me go change my mind. But he does get all Dr. Altman's records, everything, all or 300 pages. And he goes through everything. And he still says, I'm fine. So now, because Delta interjected, it went to the FA Medical Appeals Board. And based on Wyrick's second evaluation, Medical Appeals Board said, nope, she gets her medical. She's perfectly fine, but I can't go back to work. And we have this neutral doctor. Now, the neutral doctor, during this week of this, before this came out, that at Medical Appeals Board, this neutral doctor meets with me and says she's fine. Then Delta's doctor calls him and says, no, 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 no. You got to do it again. And we're going to, no
Yeah,
expense spared.
you're not getting the result we need here. Yeah.
Exactly. No expense spared, and we'll fly anyone you need out there. And I know this to be true because when I flew back out there for my next to do it again evaluation, I had to sign a release that I wasn't buying an evaluation. And this doctor told me that they said that no expense spared. He goes, they were going to fly people out here. So we do it again. And this, to put this in perspective for the evaluation, this doctor, I think the first time charged me $24.95, $2,400, and the second time he got all the way up to 5,000 when Altman's was 74,000. Okay. And Altman's didn't even include the testing. I think the testing's another 20 or 30 grand. So, Delta's put a lot of money into to try to do me under.
And all of
Yeah.
that is, as you said earlier, you kind of alluded to the tax fraud and the other. This is
Mhm.
all subpoena. This is, follow the money type stuff. And part of me wonders, all the effort that you're putting into this, what are you not doing at work while you're trying to cover all this up?
Yeah, and I was exactly. And who's running the company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually when I got, so what I did is, so when they go through trial, and I explain this in the book, in the novels, because it's kind of fun and it's interesting. But when you do discovery, they're supposed to give you their documents, right?
Mhm.
Delta didn't. Delta believes they are above the law and they behave in that manner and they get away with it. But where we got all the documents was from Dr. Altman. And I so wanted to, wonder, why did you give us this stuff? Either he thought he was above the law, it didn't matter, or his legal counsel said, you know what, Altman, if Delta gives it to her and you don't, they're going to know you're withholding. So we have hundreds, thousands of pages of emails and documents, what went on. So I started charting. I have a chart. It's called the timeline. I think it's like 135 pages of emails and documents that went on with the company to tell you who's doing the work. And I have it color coded from, this is privileged. This came from Dr. Altman. I can use this. These are emails. And so the things that are privileged that we did get from Delta, we don't know what they were saying, but we know there was communications. And in 1 week's time, I think I had over 16 different executives, from CEO, VP, senior VP, a director, And guess who was in these meetings on these emails? Marketing, the senior VP of marketing. Uh-huh.
Marketing. Wait,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not
Because
in HR anywhere, at least.
no, there some of the earlier ones there was an HR, but HR kind of disappeared, and it was all attorneys and yeah, yeah.
Maybe HR didn't want their hands in the middle of it. So,
Oh no,
wow.
HR was all in the middle of it. The woman who fabricated the initial report after 20 years, I think she was at the company. I may be wrong in that number, but a very lengthy time. She was promoted to her very first management position, and they moved her to Salt Lake. Yeah.
You know, it just again goes back to all this effort, all the stuff they do to stop the union. Again, you're putting all this effort into all of this. Who's running the rest of the company?
That's, you know what? That is a central theme. I can't tell you how many times I've written that in all my things. Who is running the company? And on another note, for all the names that are in this, and that when the memoir comes out, I am putting everybody's name in because I have the documents. If for all the people who were involved, if you got rid of all of them, there'd be nobody to run the company. So there answers your question. They're all playing this game. Who's running the company?
Oh,
Clearly, more business was going on trying to discredit Karlene Petitt. I honestly think it was my doctoral research. I really believe that. I believe their diagnosis and coming at me the manner in which they did was because my dissertation was on pilot performance, safety culture, um, level of understanding and automation. And I based all my survey questions on what I saw ongoing at Delta, but I de-identified them and I made it a worldwide survey and I had over 7,400 pilots. And what we learned in my research is that we have a negative safety culture worldwide, number one, that safety culture clearly impacts pilot training. Pilot training clearly impacts level of understanding, but the more pilots go to training, their performance goes down.
oh.
Now that was one of the professors when I was defending my dissertation, his jaws open. He's going, "What do you think they'll do now?"
So this is
And
something that I wanted to get in because you've got this new guy, he's at the FAA right now as we're recording this, and he has wavered. What is it, the 2,500 minimum hour to be an airman or commercial pilot?
they yeah, they changed. It was 1,500 hours.
Yeah,
So is that or yeah, 1,500 hours,
yeah,
and they lowered it for the ab initio schools, I think, to 1,000.
yeah. And you've got someone literally leading that whole the decision maker, and he's wavering. So it almost kind of comes back to, the two or three medical things, the bipolar thing we talked about, someone with a CPAP. I talked to a very senior flight attendant at American on one of my flights, and he tried to go from a flight attendant into the cockpit, and he ended up having an eye issue. It was a vision, like retinal issue. Are do you see that something is breaking with any of those kinds of diagnosis that, we already talked about the hours. That's something you can literally count, hour by hour. But do you think that they're going to waver in some of these other things?
Um, I don't think so because I don't think the airlines wants to waiver them in, and the airlines are running the FAA. The FAA is not. It's the tail that's wagging the dog is what's going on here. Um, they're not going to do it because it's a good tool for them to get rid of people. Okay, so they don't want to see it go away. I always wondered that, would I rather fly with somebody who's on medication or who needs to be on medication, right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Are you
you know,
contributing to your recovery? Yeah.
exactly. But you know what the real problem is, these flight hours. Oh, we need this flight hour experience. It's really performance because when I was trying to get on with America West, they required 1,500 hours. It wasn't a federal regulation. It's just they had so many pilots, and they just made this mandatory number. And I had 1,400 hours. Okay,
Mhm.
but I'd been flying a 727. Then I was a second officer at Braniff, and so my 1,400 hours was heavy jet time, right?
Mhm.
And plus, I was way over that if you counted my second officer time operation for a 121 carrier. And the gal I spoke to, she said, I was explaining this to her, and she said, Karlene, I go, well, and I told her, I said, it wouldn't be right. I could go out and get an instructing job. I could go get a job, but then I'm not going to do that to a company that's going to hire me, train me so I can get 100 hours and leave them. I won't do it. That's unethical to me. They're invest. I'm not going to screw them over. And she said, okay, just go rent a small airplane and do touch and goes for 100 hours. And so what that tells you is it's not experience. It's 1 hour of
Just checking a
flight.
box, yeah.
Yeah. So is your 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours or 5,000 hours, 1 hour of flight, 1 hour, 2,000 times. So you have nothing else but that 1 hour. This automation, oh, the pilots, uh, this automated aircraft, they got hired and they've been a 787 captain for 10 years. They've got 14,000 hours. Okay, what experience do they really have? 14,000 hours of pushing the buttons, rotating, autopilot on, let it fly, land. Okay, do they have any aerodynamic experience at all? Do they have any understanding of the weather at all because dispatch gives it to you? Do they have any understanding of how much fuel they need because they tell you what fuel load you're going to take? And so what's happening with these new pilots, not only do we have this generation of children who have been coddled and they've been micromanaged and they have Google and instant internet and everything's
And
instant gratification.
I would add to that, they don't know how to fail.
Exactly. Because even when they do fail, they got the trophy, right?
Yeah.
And so they go in and they get this job. Their parents pay their $250,000. They go to this fancy school. They get trained by the 200-hour pilot and student who trains them. And then they start training with the 200-hour. And so they make it to the airline and they know nothing. And I'm going to tell you something so absolutely frightening. I was talking about this Air India crash, okay, and I'm not blaming the anything on anyone other than I identified something that I wondered, would pilots know to do this? Because when they lost both engines, now they're saying that it's the captain cut them, or they're saying it's broken. That will come out, right?
Yeah.
But the performance, operational performance of this airplane, I'm going to tell you, if you're in an airplane and you're on the ground, V1 means anything before you abort, after you go. If you lose your two engines after V1, don't go, pull the power, hit the wall. If you rotate and you lose your two engines, put that nose down on the ground. If you're climbing out and you have 180 knots, you can use the energy to take you as high as you can to your uh, just prior to your stall speed, but then you've got to put the nose down. Okay, you got to put the nose down and get a glide,
Well, you're
and
just
you
going to
have
stall otherwise. You can't keep going.
exactly, and that airplane stalled. That Air India plane stalled. So there's a lot of trolls out on the internet. A lot of people just like to attack because they like to attack. But I saw this issue and I'm thinking, this is a learning moment. We don't know why that plane lost at the time. We don't know why it lost power. We don't know anything. All we know is we can see it stalling and dropping. And so I thought, what a good learning moment. Hey, pilots worldwide, if you ever lose your two engines, put that nose over, glide it as long as you can. If you have stuff in front of you, try and avoid the bad stuff, hit the trees, do what you can, but never stop flying the plane. Even Bob Huber said, fly into the crash, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, what a good learning moment. This is a horrible event, but could we learn from it? A Delta captain wrote to me, and this is the most frightening thing. He said, If I were those pilots, I would have done the exact same thing and pulled the nose up as high as I can to get as slow as airspeed as possible. This is a Delta A320 captain. And I'm going, oh, I think I responded with, oh my God, you're a product of Delta. But it was frightening. And so I wrote to him on the side and I said, hey, you go get training, you go do something. Well, when I went to write to him on the side of LinkedIn, I found out that he had messaged me back in 2018, wanting to know how to get on with Delta and what to do. So we had a little chit chat. I learned that he's only been with Delta for 2 years. He's an A320 captain. He's at his second year. He's enough seniority to move to A320 captain. He has no concept.
Oh, you had that with 757s as well. You had,
Yeah,
depending on your base, they were going right into the cockpit. Traditionally, that had taken decades to get
exactly. We
there.
have got 330 pilots, the same thing that they're going right into the 330. Excuse me, not as captain. Sorry about that. But I wrote to him and he goes, "Oh, I understand, I understand." Because I told him I was going to report him to the FAA. So he really backed down. And then I responded and said, you owe this to your family. Your family, your
Yeah,
friends, don't kill your passengers, don't kill yourself.
yeah.
Get the training you need. You're not getting it at the airline.
Well, what happened
And
recently,
yeah,
just another example of Newark. You had, what was it, the FAA guy that was saying that Newark is safe, but then he called his wife and said, don't fly to Newark.
uh-huh. Yeah, I had a captain tell me, he said that was the most unsafe operation. He goes, I would bid around that. He goes, I maybe had to do it twice in, my 30-year career, but I would bid around that every chance I got. So we know this and we're not doing anything. And we
Yeah,
know training substandard. So what this whole Air India crash and these responses have identified to me, my doctoral research identified pilots lack understanding, training substandard, and we have a negative safety culture without a doubt, and is impacting performance. But this Air India crash and these comments have identified that we have a whole entire generation of pilots out there who don't understand aerodynamics. And when their planes break, they won't know what to do. They won't have an idea how to fly, how to manage the mass. They don't know. Yeah,
well,
and Air India, if the guy really did cut the power, he could have been pulling back and doing it on purpose. Okay, he very well could have. We don't
I've seen the
know.
pictures of
Yeah,
where the switches are right there. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, we have about, 5 more minutes to wrap it up. Thank you. It goes back to, this is complicated stuff. This, and we've already recorded, close to 2 hours here of just commentary and stories and war stories and all that kind of stuff. It's complicated, and there's so much that you know in your head. It's almost what I remember. There's a group called StoryCorps that their mission is to actually, the elders among us, and making sure that everything that is in their head, while they still have their faculties, is making sure that it's documented somehow. So this is really, I don't know that we're doing this necessarily to, as first priority, to scare people, but it's just, imagine if nobody was telling these stories.
Right. And that's what that's the problem. That's what there are more stories out there,
Yeah.
but because these airlines have a social media policy, they're prohibited from talking. Nobody can talk. And I left 4 years early. And I refused when we settled finally to not sign an NDA. I would not do that because without people knowing, without public awareness, the public is who can make change. It's the public, but they have to know. And they're being sold a marketing ploy. And
Yeah.
our new FA administrator, I mean, he's the president of the code share airlines with airlines. The airlines owns FAA now again. You want to hear another little dirty secret that when Steve Dixon, who also one of the two people I gave the report to, ended up in the FAA, Delta was still violating duty time regulations. I wrote another report. This time I ran it up the chain and said, okay, I'm taking it to the FAA. And I took it to the FAA. They investigated. Steve Dixon's in office. And they said, oh, no, it's just a workaround. I go, wait a minute, time out. Any workaround of a federal regulation is a violation of the federal regulation safety management systems, which is required by law to mitigate risk. So if you're working around a safety regulation, you're not mitigating risk, you're doing the opposite. Why in 2016 do I have a FOIA request that they violated the exact same thing they're doing today? And there it was a violation, today it's not. And you know what he said? Um, um, we can't find the file. It's
How
missing.
convenient.
Yeah, I said, yeah, go look in Steve Dixon's desk. But the reality, these files are in electronic format. That man went into the FAA and sanitized Delta's violations.
Mm,
Now, how frightening is that?
yeah,
So when the airlines own the FAA, you know what? I'm going to ask you, what's the purpose of the FAA anyway, then? What are they
yeah,
doing? Why do we even need them? We don't. You can disband the whole friggin' department because they're not doing their job.
yeah.
So, all right, that's all I'm going to say on that part.
Well, no, like I said earlier,
Only that's all I'm going to say. Only because I know we're out of time. Otherwise, I
is
could
that
say a
true?
whole
Yeah.
lot more.
We'll be back in touch. Like I said, Dr. Pettit, Captain Pettit, you just say call you Karlene, but thanks for doing all this, and we'll
Thank you.
get this published out and have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you. You too. Great
Talk to you
talk
later.
chatting with you. Bye bye.
Bye.